For years, I've gotten some jollies out of calling the Browns the skid marks. And the reason being is they have clearly been the skid marks of the National Football League. But if you thought they had bottomed out before, 2017 was the true bottoming out of this organization. 0-16 is 0-16 no matter how you spin it. And it was only right after so many years of bad, so many years of suck, that this team took its rightful place alongside the 2008 Detroit Lions in history. And that's what they did. In comes, though, a new general manager in John Dorsey, who, for some reason, is not allowed to send Hugh Jackson packing after a 1-31 start to Hugh Jackson's Cleveland Browns coaching career. But nonetheless, that's the environment that John Dorsey found himself in with the Cleveland Browns this offseason. And of course, as we all know, they were very active in the offseason. And the one thing he could be thankful for with the situation that he was coming into, not only was he going to have the number one overall pick to where if he found a quarterback, he could have the choice of whatever one he wanted, but thanks to the previous regime under Sashi Brown, he had a nice accumulation of draft pick capital to where this organization could really, really do something in the draft and start to move that needle in a more positive direction. Now with the draft in the rearview mirror, I look at the entirety of it, and honestly, I'm unsure of what to think. The easy thing for me to do, because it's the Cleveland Browns, and no, just because it's John Dorsey doesn't make that much a hella beans difference, because we're talking about a John Dorsey that in Kansas City built a wild card team, okay? Just because he's a lot better than what you've had doesn't automatically make him great. I look at this and I question a little bit the philosophy, the approach, the execution, but it's not like so ragingly bad where I feel like I just default to crapping all over the skid marks. Nor did I come away so incredibly impressed where I say, oh my God, this is the draft that truly begins that championship road for the Cleveland Browns that we look back on in 3, 4, 5 years and say this is the moment in time that everything changed. I did not get that impression with this team this go round. When you look at the draft, for a while there was quite a bit of a debate on Twitter, social media, the draft circles, about who was going to go number one. Who were the Browns going to take? At one point in time, people were going with, say, Saquon Barkley. Another time, they were going with Sam Darnold. Then there was a belief that it was going to be Josh Allen. And in the last day or two before the draft, the reality of Baker Mayfield being the number one pick finally caught up with everybody. And lo and behold, as we found out, Baker Mayfield was the guy. Baker Mayfield's the one, the 6-foot quarterback out of Oklahoma, with the bad arrest from last year, he's the one that goes number one overall to the Cleveland Browns. My one thought on this is, as much as everybody talks about Josh Allen being an outlier, and based off of the lack of accuracy from a statistical standpoint that he just demonstrated at Wyoming, you could definitely make the argument that he would be if he was successful at the NFL. I don't understand why so many people don't view Baker Mayfield as that similar type of outlier. This is a 6-foot quarterback with off-the-field issues. Oftentimes, quarterbacks with off-the-field issues don't do very well in the NFL. See Jamarcus Russell, see Johnny Manziel, see Jim Druckenmiller, and there are others. Sure, you could say Jameis Winston's been okay, Cam Newton's been okay, but there have been even more quarterbacks with off-the-field questions that have not done so well when drafted highly. And then you look at the history of the position. Sure, you've got Drew Brees and you've got Russell Wilson, and these are quarterbacks that are 6 feet or under that have been incredibly successful in the league. Drew Brees was also taken in the second round, the same draft that Michael Vick went number one overall, who himself was under 6'1", but an entirely different type of new generation dynamic athlete than what Baker Mayfield is at the quarterback position. And Russell Wilson was a third-round pick. And as much as you can praise the Seahawks for taking him in round 3, the reality is, if they were truly that convinced that Russell Wilson was that guy, they would have taken him in the first round no matter what anybody would have said and would have let history vindicate them long term. But you can point to this and say this and this, but those guys are kind of outliers. They are exceptions to the rule. The vast, vast majority of the starting quarterbacks in the league, let alone the successful starting quarterbacks in the league, are at least 6'2" or taller. So you're talking about a guy that lacks size with some off-the-field questions. He is every bit the risk and the outlier that Josh Allen is, whether you like him or not. Like, Josh Allen is my number one quarterback in this draft, and I completely agree with the fact that him being successful would be an outlier. People should be able to accept that Baker Mayfield is a massive one, too. And I will at least give John Dorsey this. He had the balls to take his guy. Because clearly taking Baker Mayfield number one, that means that was your dude. It wasn't Sam Darnold, it wasn't Josh Allen, and most certainly wasn't Josh Rosen or Lamar Jackson. Baker Mayfield was his guy. And at least I will say, if nothing else, John Dorsey got his guy. I actually have more of a problem with that second first-round pick at pick 4. I shouldn't have been that surprised that they took Denzel Ward, but we're talking about a 5'10 corner where you have some concerns about whether or not he can hang full-time on the outside. You're talking about a guy that was drafted ahead of Bradley Chubb, who most people, including myself, felt was a better defensive prospect in this draft, and frankly, I had other defensive prospects more highly rated in this draft than him. They did not trade down and get additional draft pick capital. They did not draft another offensive player, number 4, to go with the quarterback they had just taken, because ultimately, long term, the only thing that's going to really truly matter is whether Baker Mayfield becomes that guy. If he becomes that guy, then the whole conversation about the Cleveland Browns changes just like that. But if he's not, you can look at taking defensive backs too high at pick 4 as a reason that they're not. And I understand why there are some Browns fans that cynically look at this and they feel like it's somewhat of a reminder of the Justin Gilbert, Johnny Manziel draft of 2014. There are a few similarities. Biggest difference, at least, the quarterback went first this time. But you look at the rest of the draft: Austin Corbett, Nick Chubb, Chad Thomas, Antonio Callaway, Genard Avery, Damion Ratley, Simeon Thomas. You look at that class, and there are guys that can play in there, and there are guys that you feel like have upside. There are guys with some risk associated with them. It just didn't feel like the type of class that I would want to hang my hat on coming off of an 0-16 season. When I look at their best pick, I think it was Nick Chubb. Getting him in round 2, he could very well end up being the best running back in this class if his knee holds up. I still think their worst pick was Denzel Ward, and I do not mean that to say that I think he's going to be a bust or he's not going to be a very good NFL player. I just thought it was a poor job of managing the draft at pick 4. There were better players available, and there were better potential situations available for Cleveland, in my opinion, than what they actually did. In terms of picks that could surprise, Antonio Callaway is massively talented and a massive moron. He's either going to be out of the league by 2019 or 2020 or suspended all the time, so he might as well be. Or he's a guy that finally gets his crap together and he starts to realize his big-time potential. And a guy like him could really take this draft class to another level, because if you're talking about getting a productive starting wide receiver on the outside with a 4th-round pick, you feel really good about that draft. I also look at Genard Avery, and I feel like this is a guy that was a little underrated in the process. I like some of the upside that he has. When I look at the philosophy of this draft, I think it is important to look at the entirety of the body of work with the Cleveland Browns. In my opinion, they didn't take the best quarterback at number 1 overall. And they did make a massive reach, in my opinion. More importantly, they did take a massive risk. Drafting Baker Mayfield at number 1 overall is every bit as ballsy as drafting Josh Allen would have been without some of the physical upside that Josh Allen had. They ultimately hung their hat on a 6-foot quarterback with off-the-field questions. Then when you look even more at this draft, like, I don't think that Baker Mayfield's going to be a full-on bust. I'm just not convinced he's going to be a star. The talk would be much different if it was Josh Rosen. I'd be hammering him 6 ways from Sunday. I look at this draft, though, and I look at pick 4. They turn the opportunity to draft Deshaun Watson into Denzel Ward. That feels like a big step back, does it not? I mean, if you choose to look at it that way, because the Texans took their 1st-round pick of 2018 as part of the package to move up to 12 in 2017 to get Deshaun Watson. They took Deshaun Watson and turned him into Denzel Ward. That feels like a pretty big loss. You've got this gaping void with Joe Thomas retiring, and you take Austin Corbett in round 2, who I think is a really good player, deserved to go in round 2. I don't even have a problem with the area that he went within round 2, but I do wonder, I think he could potentially play left tackle at the NFL level, but he might still be better served at guard or particularly center. How is that helping void the gap left by Joe Thomas's retirement? Even when you talk about Nick Chubb, you have to keep this in mind. The Browns basically paid $16 million to get this second-round pick from Houston via taking Brock Osweiler in that trade and paying his salary in 2017. So you already have $16 million invested into Nick Chubb before he's even signed his contract. You traded away a third-round pick for a bridge quarterback in Tyrod Taylor that if things really went right, would never see the field because Baker Mayfield would come in and be the day one starter. Or at some point in time, even if you said Mayfield doesn't start this year, Taylor's not going to start very long, that's for sure. You've either got a guy that you gave up a third-round pick for that rides the bench after half a season or a full season or might be gone after a year. Whereas you could have turned that third-round pick into ammo to move up and get an even more premium prospect or draft somebody that could have helped your roster for the next 4 to 10 damn years. Now, granted, they did use a couple of day 3 picks to acquire Jarvis Landry, and that was a great deal. But they also take a wide receiver in the 4th round who demonstrates, honestly, zero life intelligence. So I go back and forth a lot with this Browns draft class because I really, truly wanted this to be a great draft for them. I really, truly wanted to not look at them and say they are the joke, the laughingstock of the league, because frankly the joke has gotten kind of old. It is time to find somebody else to bully and pick on. And the situation set up so perfectly. You've got the number 1 pick. Frankly, you've got 2 picks in the top 4 in this draft, which was a decent draft class. You've got 3 second-round picks. You've got all this power and draft pick ammo. And it feels like they under-delivered. And sure, a lot of that probably revolves around the fact that I'm not particularly impressed with them taking Baker Mayfield number 1 and taking Denzel Ward especially at number 4. And that is absolutely true. But that is part of it. And in 3 years, I could be dead wrong. And a lot of this ultimately will hinge upon Baker Mayfield. And I summarize this draft for John Dorsey and the Browns like this. It's going to come down to one of 3 things. Either A, Baker Mayfield proves his believers right, and the Browns could be a championship contending team in 3 years. B, his game doesn't translate and or he doesn't focus right, he gets in trouble off the field, or he pisses off people in the locker room, and Baker Mayfield washes out in 3 years and proves a lot of his doubters right. Or 3, you're going to look at this draft class for the Browns and say it was good but not great. Mayfield was good, but there was better. Denzel Ward was good, but there was better. Austin Corbett was good, there was better. Chad Thomas was good, there was better. That's how I summarize to me and feel about this Browns draft. It wasn't bad. There were elements of it that were good. But you look at the entirety of the picture, you feel left like you want so much more. And for me, yes, I feel like it could have been so much better.